Hello, everyone, and welcome to Evenings with an Author at the American Library in Paris. Who here's at the American Library for the first time? That's a pretty good size. Well, if this is your first time, welcome. We're so delighted that you found us. We have been in operation for over 100 years. We are the largest English language lending library on the European continent. And over the course of our institution's history, we have been the intellectual home to figures such as Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, Edith Wharton, and we remain a living cultural center today, promoting innovations in writing and the arts, and in the culinary arts as well, across the city. We host events like this 2 to 3 times per week, so I highly encourage you to look at our program's calendar and see if there are other events coming up that might interest you as well. Just a couple notes about what this event will look like. After about 45 minutes of conversation, we will be opening it up to a Q&A from our lovely donut-stuffed in-person audience and our Zoom audience who's trapped in that camera right there and has had no donuts tonight, which is, I'm so sorry if you're on Zoom and you have been denied the pleasure. You'll just have to go to Bone Shaker.
Like folding laundry.
Yeah, they might have a glass of wine with them, so they're okay. And after the conversation has concluded, we will be holding a book sales and signing thanks to our partner, booksellers Smith & Son. So go purchase a copy and get it signed. On to our brilliant speakers tonight. It is such a pleasure to be joined by David Lebovitz and Amanda Bankert as they discuss Voila Vegan, which is Amanda's amazing new book. So David spent nearly 13 years in the kitchen at Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California, one of the original farm-to-table restaurants in America. He was named one of the top 5 pastry chefs in the Bay Area by the San Francisco Chronicle and has been featured in Bon Appetit, Chocolatier, Food and Wine, Milk Street, Cooks Illustrated, and many more. And he left the restaurant in business in 1999 to start writing cookbooks and launched a website, they're now called blogs, to coincide with the release of his first book, Room for Dessert. He's the author of 9 books, including My Paris Kitchen, with stories and recipes about life and cooking in Paris, and Drinking French, which was named the best new cocktail book by the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation. And tonight, that was a surprise. And tonight, David is interviewing the brilliant Amanda Bankert, who is an Irish-American pastry chef trained at the Cordon Bleu in Paris and the founder of France's first plant-based donut shop, Bone Shaker Donuts and Coffee, who generously provided mini donuts that you were able to sample tonight. So thank you so much, Bone Shaker, for making those donuts for us. They were delicious. She's a 2-time cookbook author, Voila Vegan, which is being discussed tonight, and Donuts, Cafe, and Good Vibes. Amanda champions veganism not as a restrictive diet, but as an inclusive, indulgent lifestyle that simply excludes animal products. Amanda, I think you have such a brilliant, creative, imaginative, empowering approach to food. I think you really demonstrate in this book and in your work that other ways of eating and looking at what we put in our bodies is possible. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are just so delighted to have you. And yes, I'll leave it in your beautiful, capable hands.
Thank you very much.
Big round of applause.
That was an amazing introduction. You should write all the introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got everything in there. Except there were only 5 pastry chefs in the Bay Area, so I just barely made it. So it was very interesting when I was asked to do this with Amanda tonight, and also before that when I got sent her book, and a friend of mine said, I have a friend, Amanda. It's our friend from Abricot Bar, and she goes, "Oh, hi." And she said, Amanda's great. You're going to love her, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, And so she's like, she's going to get a quote. She wants a quote for her book. And I was like, And usually, people write to me and they're like, you have a new book. It's paleo desserts, with no sugar, no flour. I'm like, it's not my subject. But I got her book and it was really good. And it was fun. Like it wasn't... like Amanda Cohen has this restaurant in New York called Dirt Candy.
Yes.
And she's like, I want to prove that vegetarian food doesn't have to be sad. And I don't think she's even a vegetarian. She's just like, she's into vegetarian food. So this book was really fun. And I've been to Bone Shaker a few times, and it's also really fun. It's also really busy on the weekends. So avoid going on the weekends unless you don't mind waiting in line a bit.
Don't avoid going on the weekend.
Okay, no, go during the week so when they're slower. Yeah, come on the weekends, but just be prepared for a little bit of wait. But tonight when I saw the title of what we were supposed to talk about, the future of vegan food in Paris, I was like, so I'm not an expert on that, but we'll talk about that. I think we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But she's so easy to talk to, I thought, I don't even need notes. We'll just
go
talk.
for it.
Yeah. But I do have notes because I do come prepared. So when I moved to Paris in like 2002, 2003, the idea of vegan or vegetarian food or donut shop was really crazy. And now there's like every restaurant has like almost every restaurant has like a vegetarian selection. There's vegan stuff everywhere. Heather, who has Secrets of Paris today, got her newsletter, and she mentioned a vegan sushi place. And the vegan sushi looked better than the fish sushi in Paris.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going there. So that's on our list. But when you arrived, you lived in Ireland.
Yes.
And when I met you, I said, why'd you move to Paris? Ireland's paradise.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I was here first, probably around the same time as you. So I came over here in 2003 to study to be a pastry chef.
At Cordon Bleu.
At Cordon Bleu,
Okay.
yeah. And I remember as well, like, absolutely, the idea of anything being vegetarian, or it was like
Oof.
it was,
Well,
yeah.
So wait, yeah.
it was a different Paris. And so during the course of my studies, I, as my dad likes to joke, and as I mentioned in the book, unexpectedly got a bun in the oven.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to pastry school and graduated with a bun in the oven. And my son's dad was from Dublin. And so we decided to move to Ireland to be near family and wait for our son to be born.
Okay.
Yes.
And why did you leave Ireland? Because Ireland to me is sort of paradise. Has everyone been to Ireland? It's like the nicest place. Everyone's like super nice. It's really green. The food's really good if you know where to go. But
Yeah.
I've actually had really good food. They have amazing butter.
Ireland is lovely. So we went and
That sounds really
it
good.
does,
Yeah.
which maybe not great for a vegan discussion, but
Okay. I'm sure they have really good plant-based butter too. Yeah.
But yeah, so we moved there with the expectation. I really loved Paris, and so the expectation was always to go. I'd never really experienced Ireland before. I'd been over a few times, obviously, to visit his family and had a lovely time. But we thought we'll move. Our baby will be born, and then we wanted to come back to Paris because we had met here, we lived here, and just the way that life goes, we ended up splitting up instead after about a year and a half. And I just kind of stayed in Ireland then I was there almost a decade all in, but in kind of the way that life just sort of happens, so the years just kind of went by and I was working and I did like Ireland. The most honest answer I can give you, and I know this probably sounds ridiculous, but I never got used to the weather. I just never got used. I know, but listen,
Okay.
at least we have like 3 months of summer here, or for the most part, it's going to be sunny. It's going to be like there. I really genuinely did struggle with the fact that even in July, there are days that you're wearing like your wool coat and
Okay.
it is.
Well, a lot of my friends are going to Ireland this summer. They're not going to the south of France anymore. They're like, forget it.
Right. We're
No.
doing
Or
Ireland.
Sweden. I was
Yeah.
like,
It's
get your
it's cool,
yeah.
but bring a coat.
yeah.
But it's lovely. As you said, the food is fantastic. I was actually just there last
Cork.
week. Yeah, I was in Cork. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, it is. Like I would, I love Ireland, but I prefer
And they go
living here.
foraging. Like when I was there, where you were like at a bar, like or a pub, and they're like, I'm going to go get some carrageen. And
Yeah.
they run down to the river and they put it in the bar and everyone's eating the seaweed. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they were super nice.
Super
They're
nice.
like the nicest people. Whenever I call Apple here,
Yeah.
you get Ireland, like, how you doing, David? Oh, you sound like you're having a problem with your computer. We're going to help you. I'm like, so you left there.
I did.
For Paris.
For Paris. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I moved back to Paris in 2012.
Okay, and you decided to open Bone Shaker, like, was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
8 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I first started in 2015, and we opened the doors in 2016. So Bone Sugar's been operating since 2015, and then the brick and mortar opened in 2016. So what's that, 7 years? I'm terrible at math.
I don't even know what I had
whatever.
for lunch
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
Yeah,
So whatever. But yeah, it's been a few years. So I was here for a few years, and then I opened Bone Shaker.
Okay, so when you opened it, though, you weren't vegan at the
No.
time.
No.
So what changed?
So I'd been vegetarian on and off since childhood. So I was always somebody who kind of leaned towards
Were
vegetarianism.
your parents vegetarian?
Not at all.
So you just went like
I just went rogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was difficult when I worked in professional kitchens, as you can probably imagine, it really wasn't cool to be vegetarian. You know, like I got a lot of flack from a lot of my
Really?
coworkers.
Okay.
Yeah, big time. But kind of in a lovingly way. You know, it was one of my like weird quirks, but they put up with it. But it was not cool. Like it was like a dorky thing about me that I was vegetarian. And so that was also why I would sometimes eat some of the food that they were preparing as well, though, because I was working in some of the best restaurants in the city, and so they were. But I always veered back towards vegetarianism. Veganism seemed completely unthinkable to me as a pastry chef, because I was like, so I was vegetarian for ethical reasons. I, didn't want to eat animals, and so, but I spent my entire day using butter, eggs, my entire life. So I just didn't even really consider it as an option. And it was just something, though, that as years went by, I became more interested in it. I started reading, almost like, despite myself, kind of being like, no, don't. But I found it very interesting. And so I would research it a bit more, and it seemed kind of a little more appealing. And so then I, was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just try it for like a month and see how I feel. But I just felt really pulled to it. Tried it for a month, loved it. And then set immediately out on being like, okay, so this is how I want to eat. It aligns. I feel great. It aligns with, my beliefs. I'm comfortable with this. And then I thought, but now I have this bakery that is using like pounds and pounds of butter and, dozens and dozens of eggs every day. And I thought, if I don't want to eat that and support that industry, I don't want my bakery to either. So I immediately was like, well, we're just going to have to make recipes that taste indistinguishable, because at this point we'd been operating for about 4 years. So Bone Sugar was about 4 years old. We had like a loyal client base of people that were coming in, and I was certainly not going to like the next day be like, surprise, like now everything is vegan, because I was like, people are going to freak out.
Restaurant meeting. Yeah.
Exactly. So I decided instead to kind of do it a little bit sneakily, and just recipe by recipe, develop alternatives that tasted exactly like the donut that the person had been eating for the last 4 years.
Or better.
Or better.
Because I, in my newsletter, I featured Amanda's recipe for vegan marshmallows. And my partner, who's Parisian, he came home. Amanda came over and made them with me. We had fun in the kitchen. We had chartreuse marshmallows and everything. Vegans drink.
Yes, vegans drink.
I used to live in a macrobiotic community, and everyone drank gin. They're like obsessed with gin. But my partner came home, and he's like, these are better than your marshmallows, because I make standard marshmallows with egg whites or with sugar and corn syrup. So a lot of times things are better, and they're softer, and they have like a nicer texture, actually. So I actually prefer don't tell anyone, but because I have to go back to my books and change things.
Right.
But it's kind of great you did that, and it seemed to only increase your business.
Yeah. And well, we were secretly vegan for a number of years. Even now, it's something that we don't advertise. We don't hide it, but we don't advertise it.
Okay, I went with Heather a couple months ago, and it was mobbed. How many of your people, would you say, what percentage are there who know you're vegan or are there because you're vegan?
I would say it's 30 or 40%. Like I would say, honestly, still the vast majority of the majority, maybe not the vast majority, the majority of our customers are not there because it's vegan, or maybe even know that it's vegan. So I would say, I would guesstimate probably about 30% maybe are there because it's vegan.
So we were talking about how Paris has changed, and now veganism is a thing. It's a gluten-free pasta restaurant on the corner here. And, that would have been unthinkable years ago.
Yes.
But recently I had a friend in town, and she was with her family and her sister who's vegan. And she wanted to go to a bistro, and she didn't tell me her sister was vegan beforehand. And I reserved it a bistro, and then she said, oh, my sister's vegan, but she can work around the menu. I was like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It's just, it's nothing on the menu. So when you go out to eat or you have friends, do you go out to eat like anywhere or?
I would say
Everywhere?
Yeah, everywhere. No, but that was actually one of
Where
the
do you eat too?
Right. Well, so I can eat almost anywhere nowadays, which is great. Again, maybe not my like corner bistro in the 20th. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I can get fries and a salad, surely. You know. But the cool thing is, as you were saying, it has changed so much now that at pretty much any of the bistros now, I'll have to call it. Well, it's polite for me to call in advance. I think you know what I mean, and just give them a heads up.
When you reserve,
Yeah,
you should
exactly.
tell,
I definitely give a heads up. And honestly, I think there's only been one time where I was told, literally, they were like, we have nothing for you, which is, that's really unusual. And that was kind of recent with a friend of mine, and I won't name names where I was, but it was.
Are they in this room? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
but the restaurant we went to, because I was very surprised, because it was kind of this like hip, like, you know, place, the type of place that I was like, when she suggested it, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Yeah. But I was like, she was like, oh, I'm worried because I don't see anything on the menu that's vegan. And I was like, oh, no, this is definitely like, I'll give them a heads up. And certainly, and they legit were like, just no. Like, but that's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Like most chefs nowadays are actually quite excited to kind of put something together. You know what I mean? Like, I think they're like, this would be cool and fun. And it's
well, when I was a baker, pastry chef, I liked when people had food stuff.
Yeah, because you get to play around.
Yeah, we had a woman that only ate white food, and she came in. She called, and we made white asparagus with white truffles.
Yeah.
And she came in. She was dressed in all white, white makeup, and she was Daryl F. Zanuck's daughter or something. So it was really cool.
Yeah.
But I love that. It's a challenge, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I get to do something different.
Well, that's when I first started changing all the recipes to being plant-based. It was so fun because, you know, it was this whole new world of like discovering things. And I mean, I think all chefs, we all kind of like to play around a little bit.
Chefs.
Yeah, pastry chefs.
Well, we like to learn. I think we're like, what would it be like to use, you know, baking powder versus baking soda? But then instead of eggs, what can I use?
Yeah.
What can I use instead of flour?
Right.
To hold this cake together, and you don't. There's all this natural stuff. You don't need to get weird and.
No, exactly.
Except you use Crisco in your book.
I do use Crisco.
We're getting there. The Zoom people are all. I see everyone like shutting the window down. Yeah.
I do have a disclaimer about that at the beginning as well, just being like, you know, obviously, if you don't want to, don't. Like
you don't
that's
have
the
to.
That's the disclaimer. Don't do it if you don't want to. But no, Crisco was something that I was looking, and I actually thought they were my grandma's recipes. And then my parents were in town in January, and my dad was like, what are you talking about? Like, grandma never made pie crust. So it turns out it was actually my great-grandma's recipes. But my grandmother had given me her, like, a lot of her recipe cards and stuff when I started getting really interested in baking, like, many, many years ago. So apparently they're my great-grandmother's, like, handwritten
shortening.
Yeah, but and some of them, as they get, I guess, closer towards, like, the 50s, they'll list Crisco and stuff. So it's shortening Crisco. And so I thought, I'll give it a try. Do you know what I mean? Because I think we have this idea of, I mean, obviously it is like an industrial product, but I think also it's people were using it, you know, almost 100 years ago, and it does yield a delicious result. And so it's kind of like it was.
Well, I don't know if you know who Marianne Cunningham was. She wrote the Fanny Farmer cookbook.
Yes.
And she was sort of this legendary cookbook author. She was invited to the Ritz to do a cooking class, and she was really into Crisco. Like, she's like, I have to make biscuits. And am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, does anybody mind?
Well, it's the S word. It's the S word. It's not a bad word. But she went to this class at the Ritz, and she pulled out this can of Crisco, and the French chef looked at it and said, what is this shit? She was like super offended, but she's like, it's what you make biscuits with.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would be me. I'd be, you know, if I was teaching a donut class at the Ritz these days, I'd be rolling up with my tub of Crisco.
Well, basically, people also like, you know, you're not looking for, like, to get nutrients when you have dessert, you know.
Right. Well, and I'm also not advocating, like, don't get a spoon out and, like, you know, eat it out of the tub. Like, you know, we're using it for a specific purpose.
So so I was at a dinner recently, and we were talking about veganism. And Someone said, well, some vegans eat oysters
I had heard this, yes.
because they don't have a central nervous system.
Yes.
Do we have any vegans here that eat oysters? Do you eat oysters? Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah. Because why? Okay, because they don't have a central nervous system.
We're like, you are in the hot seat.
Yeah. You get in front of Zoom, you're going to be shamed. No, but some vegans don't eat honey
Yeah.
because it went through an animal and
Yeah.
so forth, or sugar.
I mean, I think there's a lot of like layers and it can get very
Yeah.
complicated and people feel very passionately about certain things. For me, I eat plants, I just keep it simple. But I also don't believe ever in like shaming anybody for what they eat or what they prefer or do you know what I mean? But there's lots of like veganism, you know, the vegan police are a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Which,
yeah.
you know.
Well, the police are, the food police are
In
everywhere
general,
now on
yeah,
the internet.
exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really kind of bad. There was a thing going around a while back, and it was on Instagram. I guess it was one of those videos or whatever. I sound like the old guy on the video. They were on Instagram, but it was somebody wrote like they were in Paris, and somebody asked the waiter for oat milk, and he said no,
Right.
or something like that.
Yes.
And everyone was like, "Yeah, way to go, Paris, way to go." I was like. Most of us were like, first of all, most cafes have oat milk.
Well, exactly. I
yeah.
saw that and I was like, I've never had an issue
Yeah,
getting it.
I mean, maybe if you went to, even like Cafe de Flore, they would have oat milk, I think.
Sure, or soy milk or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I never asked for it, but
Right.
I thought that was really, and people expect France to be like where they live at home. They would go expect to have oat milk, but in Paris, it was
Right.
like when they banned smoking here. Everyone was like, that sucks. I love coming to Paris and smelling smoke when I eat. I'm like, well, if it happened in your town of Des Moines, you'd be really pissed.
Right.
So they expected us here. But where do you eat in Paris? Like, what are some of your favorite vegan places?
So I actually tend to not eat at, well, I do, of course, but so a lot of the vegan places here, I was going to say I don't tend to eat at a lot of this, like, specific vegan
Hardcore
places.
vegan.
But I do, of course, but it's hard to get, like, a lot of them tend to be, you know, they're like burgers and stuff like that, which is
Yeah.
delicious. You know, when you fancy, you know, like a burger or something like that. But I'm not like eating at a burger joint every
Yeah.
single night. So as I said, I actually just like to go to kind of to local places or wherever my friends are going. I mean, I go to like Juveniles is one of my favorite restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And
they're really nice.
so
Yeah.
nice. And very accommodating, although he told me not to tell people that he cooks vegan because he doesn't want loads of people coming in and asking. You know, and I'm trying to it's kind of one of those like, oh gosh, on the spot. I really do like, so as far as vegan restaurants go though, and you were talking about vegan sushi, there's Breathe or Breath, I don't know how they actually pronounce it. On Montorgueil, I think it's Breathe with an E, but then I've heard people say Breath. No, Breathe, like
Breathe.
I don't know, but their food is really nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I eat a lot of like Asian restaurants as well. So like I was just at Mao Dumping Bar, is one of my favorite places. I was there. Abrico, you know, our friend Allison and Jen's bar, they're all plant-based.
Okay.
Yeah, so shout out to Abrico. But genuinely, I think that Paris, as you were saying, though, it is very veggie and vegan friendly. I think maybe you'd have more of an issue nowadays if you're, you know, maybe gluten-free or something, although you were saying there's the pasta place next door. But I find that by and large, you can get vegan food. Most people, first of all, know what it is, which also they wouldn't have even known 20
well,
years
I think
ago.
the thing about gluten-free is a lot of people don't know, like salad dressing has gluten in it, and a waiter wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So.
But it'd be tricky. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
It'd be tricky. But here, I think like we were talking about, can you imagine in 2003 telling your waiter here that you were vegan? Like they would literally be like, you know, can you eat fish?
Well, like around 2005, some friends of mine from California came to visit, and they went to in those days, like the vegetarian restaurants were a lot of stews and stuff.
Right.
And they went to one of those like old school vegetarian restaurants. And the next day I said, well, how was it? They go, well, it was interesting because they didn't have any vegetables on their menu.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain to people that don't live here, like vegetables aren't really on a lot of menus. And if they are, they might be placed by tweezers. You know, they're not like, it's not like going to, we were in Italy a couple weeks ago and, you know, they bring you like a bowl of vegetables. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
So people eat them at home. But getting back to your book, because I think we have Q&A coming. I don't even know what time it is. How we...
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. So your book, one thing I loved about your book was it sounded like you. It sounded like you were talking to people, and all the instructions you say, you know, you tell people what to look out for, and a lot of people don't do that in a recipe. Like you're like, it might look grainy, it's fine.
Right.
But I want to talk to you about pancakes, because you have
Okay.
pancakes in your book.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And in France, I see pancakes on the grocery store shelf, already made,
Right.
wrapped in plastic. So how do people here eat pancakes? Because I've asked my partner, he's like, I've never had them.
That is such a good
Yeah.
question.
And do you make them at the restaurant ever and serve them?
No, so at the restaurant we have, because we do, it really is just like equipped for donuts in the bakery downstairs. I'd love to maybe one day be able to do that, because at the moment, so the pancakes that I make are for, you know, me, family and friends at the house. So I think it's really similar. I think, and especially with American pancakes, I think it's a lot of people's kind of like first intro, do you know what I mean? Into these kind of like fluffy, huge stack of, you know, hotcakes.
Yeah.
But they're one of my favorites. They're in like regular rotation in my house, and I love pancakes. They were one of the things that, again, as I was veganizing everything, it was like, have to have like the most amazing pancake recipe. Pancakes are a Sunday staple at my house.
You know, I don't think I've ever made pancakes since I moved to Paris. Is that bad?
No, I mean,
Well, we
it's
don't
not
eat like
bad.
breakfast
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
But you have kids.
I have
You have a
kids.
child.
Yeah.
You have
yeah.
1 or 2 kids.
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need kids. It's a little late, but
Well, you can come over. I'll make you pancakes at my house. You can come over. We do the whole Bloody Marys, pancakes, vegan sausages, though. That's the only thing. Can you handle?
yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We're in the-
Well, I was trying to explain to somebody once, like, nobody eats hot dogs for the quality of the meat.
Right.
You eat it
Yeah.
for, like, the bun or the condiments. And everyone's like, oh, no, a really good hot dog. I don't think anybody really eats
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
it's like bologna. It's like, it's not a thing. But these friends of mine that I stay with every summer on the countryside, their brother-in-law, they have a 7-year-old son. And at the end of the meal, he takes everyone's dishes and washes them all.
Oh.
I'm like, where'd you get this magical person?
Yeah, where did they get this magical person?
Yeah, I was like, and is it for sale? Like, it was like, please let me have your child to do I was like, do your kids do dishes and stuff?
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, they don't, not without being asked or yelled at to do it. They
Okay.
don't just like angelically rise from the
Okay.
table to clear the plates. It's,
Okay.
you know, it's more like,
Because Roman, my partner, does that, but I was talking to he'll like leave all the lights on, or he'll like leave the kitchen cabinets open. And I was talking to my assistant who has 3 kids, and she was like, well, you have to train them from the get-go. Like, Roman's already
right,
where he is
he's
at.
too far gone.
Yeah, he's too far gone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying what I didn't want to say, because he might be watching.
Sorry, Roman.
But she's like, well, you have to form them. Formation.
Right.
La formation. So
Yeah.
Okay. So in your book, you also have this brownie recipe, and you told me that this was your signature recipe.
Yes,
It has peanut butter in it.
yes,
So we need to talk about the signature recipe and peanut butter
Yes.
in France.
yeah.
Where do you get your peanut butter?
So we...
Can you reveal your source?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the funny thing is now you can get, so I get all of our peanut butter now. There's a great source because you can get everything from Buddy Buddy. They're the best.
What's Buddy Buddy?
It's a nut atelier. You know them. They have the cafe on Canal Saint-Martin. And they have like a little coffee shop, and they also sell all these fancy nut butters.
What?
Yeah.
What?
And they're so good.
Okay. Okay.
So go there for your peanut butter.
Okay,
And it's
wow.
all organic, but
Okay.
like not the scary. Like, so they have like a little
Not
bit
the
of oil.
scary
No, but not. But you know how sometimes, especially for baking, it's a nightmare because there's that like layer of like it's
Yeah,
the healthy
for
kind.
baking, yeah,
For
it's-
baking, it's a
doesn't work.
nightmare.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. This works. So
Okay, but I pour that off and use it for Chinese food.
delicious.
cooking,
But
yeah.
then the peanut butter itself becomes like a brick. Like it's hard
Yeah.
to, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
to.
yeah. Okay,
So
okay,
I
okay.
would say Buddy Buddy if you're in Paris and you want your any nut
Is
butter.
that where you get yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where we use them all at the bakery, and then that's where I get. So I'm like a full convert, not sponsored, but you
Okay.
know, whatever.
You only have to say that for the Zoom people.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And then the brownies I started doing, they were tricky to veganize because they come from a very egg and dairy based recipe that I started making when I worked in restaurants in Dublin. So it's, for some reason, I just got really into brownies. They were just something that, do you know what I think it might be as well? That it's a really American, especially like the fudgy brownie like that. Now I feel like it's come on a little bit more, but when I was, so let's say 2007 or 8, when I was making them in Ireland, brownies were seen, they were a really American dessert, but they were always cakey. It was always like the cake brownies.
Yeah, dry.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm team fudge brownie. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it
I
needed
like
to
all.
be, I like all, but
Yeah.
but like when it's a sea of cake brownies, I was like,
Yeah.
I want the fudge
Yeah,
brownie.
you want the.
So I set upon like being like, okay, how do I make this? And started doing that and then had to do the same thing. So that was one of the ones when I was veganizing that I was like, this is going to be, and the secret is loads of aquafaba
Okay. Which
and
is
sugar,
chickpea.
obviously. Yeah.
So, okay, French people have an interesting relationship to peanut butter
Yes.
because just my partner is like, he won't eat it. He's
Yeah.
like, I won't tell you what he says about it.
Right.
But French people eat peanuts.
Yes.
So do your customers like peanut butter? And I actually saw a big ad in the Metro recently for Skippy peanut
I know,
butter.
Crazy. I know.
I was like, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's
So I mean, for me, so neither of my kids who were born in Europe, one in France, one in, they won't eat peanut butter either. And I'm like, hello, this is like the easy, you know. But so I was nervous about putting, or maybe a little bit reticent to put peanut butter on some of our donut menu, but they sell so well. And again, French people like them.
Well, there was a guy in, he sold his chocolate shop in the 7th, Michel Chardin, and he made a peanut praline chocolate. He was a very French guy, really nice, really sweet, wonderful man. And I said, French people don't really eat peanuts. He goes, well, people think of it. He's like, they don't like the idea of it because it's like something you eat at the cafe. It's like in a bowl.
Right, right.
So
I think for me, the way that we first got people to try, it's all about getting people to try. And then once they try and if they like it, they'll go for it. But so for ours, the peanut butter one, we do two main ones. And now I incorporated them in a lot of things. But so in the brownies, for instance, they're suspended. There's also salted caramel. So you're kind of like, do you know what I mean? So you're like, there's chocolate,
put
there's
that
salted
on,
caramel. You know what I mean? So it's introduced that way. And then now, though, we also do sell brownies where they're just, there's just peanut butter swirled in. But we never would have been able to start there. You know what I mean? You got to like work your way up and earn people's trust.
Well, it's interesting because when I moved, not when I moved, like around 2005, there was a bakery near me that had brownies and they were terrible. So I said, well, I have this really good brownie recipe, and so I gave it to them, and I went back a few days later, and they're making my brownies, and they gave me one, and it was terrible. I don't know what brownies are hard. I think maybe it's an American thing.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's just, I don't know.
Like my friends always have me make the salad and salad dressings. They're like, you're from California.
Right.
Very good.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like, okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really American thing. And even though it's starting a little bit over here, I think it's kind of like, I don't know, they've like heard of a brownie. So it's like,
well, you had a brownie shop for a while.
I did, yeah. So the original location, because like the brownies, we sell a fair few of them. So when we moved locations, we originally had our original shop was like a kiosk essentially. My kitchen upstairs was 8 square meters, so it was tight. And we eventually, about 2 years ago, I think, time has like lost all meaning in recent years, but we moved to a bigger location across the street, and so we kept that original space and turned it into a brownie bar. But ultimately, we were making everything at the new place, which was across the street, and it kind of didn't really make sense to have 2 shops across the street from each other. So now we've moved everything over, so you can get the brownies and the donuts at the bigger shop.
Okay, so another controversial thing is, since we're in the American library, is pumpkin pie.
Yes.
And you have a pumpkin pie recipe in the book.
Yes.
But you also have a pumpkin pie donut, don't
Yes.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
pumpkin cake
How does
donut.
that go over?
So first of all, are you team pumpkin pie? Because even there are some Americans.
You
who
know, I
don't
wouldn't eat it when I was growing up
Yeah.
because it's gross.
Right.
It just looked gross. Like I wouldn't eat lobster either. And
Right.
I grew up in New England.
Right.
I was like, what was I thinking? But pumpkin pie is like so.
Yeah. It took a little.
I like it now.
Yeah, it's good, right? I was
Yeah.
just asking because I'm obsessed with pumpkin pie and pumpkin cake donuts.
The best recipes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it took a
Well,
little. I think the funny thing about the pumpkin, we do a pumpkin like a pumpkin pie donut essentially that's filled with like a custard filling, so it's very much kind of like biting into a pumpkin pie. That one is less of a hard sell, especially nowadays where you can be like, oh, it's like pumpkin pie in the States, because enough has kind of traveled where they're like familiar with the idea of, you know what I mean? Like even a few years ago, because we used to have to be like, they'd be like citrouille, like, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of explaining.
Ah bon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Ah bon?
Ah bon?
And then the pumpkin cake donut. So the funny thing with that is it's actually the concept of a cake donut that we have to explain more than the fact that it's pumpkin. Because cake donuts, I've also discovered, are like super American.
I love cake donuts.
Me too. Me too.
Well, I explain to people that pumpkin is a fruit. They're
Right.
like, ah bon?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, it's a fruit. It's
Yeah,
and then
exactly. Yeah.
And it's funny because like the #1 website in France, the visited #1 is Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Because people are always explaining things. Like there's always like arguments at parties like about verb tenses or something historical. Like
Super rock
like,
and roll.
What kind of fish is that? And or the bird in the tree or the leaves.
Yeah.
And in America, it's like the #1 site is Amazon.
Right.
But so they're always people are looking something like it's botanically a fruit, and they're like, ah bon?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
You're like, you can look it
And
up.
you make tarte au citron.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
So another thing I learned from your book was there's barista style oat milk, which my
Yes.
partner has discovered because
Yes.
now he's drinking oat milk in the morning sometimes.
Yeah. Yay.
So I learned from that, and it's much better.
For making custards and things like that, yes, I really prefer it because it's designed to be thicker. So you get that kind of like creaminess
Yeah,
that
it's
is
more like
lacking.
milk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I have 2 more things to bring up, and then we're going to take questions. But you cracked the code. I was kind of surprised, and I couldn't make them. But the macaroons, you have vegan macaroons.
Yes.
And it looked like that was the hardest recipe for you to crack the code of, shall we say.
100%.
And
yes.
how did you do that?
I
Like,
asked for help.
I would just
No, for
I would
real.
just assume aquafaba and
Yes.
almond meal.
But in that, I asked a friend for help, who then in turn asked a friend who specializes in macarons. That really was like a team
Okay.
effort. But I also thought that by doing a French cookbook with or not French, but based in Paris.
We have
and
a
with
lot of French
a lot of French stuff. I mean,
recipes,
it's a real mix of how, the kind of stuff that I like to eat and all that kind of stuff. So I thought I do have to do this, but I preface it by being like, this is like a project. It's one of the only recipes as well that needs kind of those funky ingredients that we were saying that by and large aren't included in the book. Because for the most part, for the book, I wanted people just to be able to reach into their cupboard most of the time and get what they need. But this one is one that uses like, potato starch and
Potato protein powder.
Yes.
I never
Yeah,
heard of that. Like I was like, stumped. Takes a lot to stump
Yes.
me now. 'Cause
Yeah,
I think
so-
I've seen everything.
So it is, but I think it is. It's like a project. Do you know what I mean? So if you are really determined to you want to make your macaron, the recipe is watertight,
Okay.
but it just takes time.
Okay. So lastly, what dessert haven't you been able to veganize?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What am I struggling with? Let me think. Oh, do you know what's? I can't do a choux pastry.
Ah, bon. Ah.
Yeah, I'm
Because of the rise?
yeah, I'm
Because it
having.
needs the eggs?
Yes. So that's on but that's like a project for me because I really wanted to have both eclairs and so that's why in the book I make a donut profiterole, but I originally started testing. I wanted to do just the regular choux, and it has evaded me as of yet.
Well, I'm thinking of popovers.
Yeah.
And what makes them rise? Is it the eggs?
I think it's yeah, I think so, right?
Okay. Because they're not whipped. It's just like
No,
batter.
yeah.
It's like crepe batter.
Yeah.
Okay, let me think about that more. Anyway, well, I think we should do some Q&A.
Sure, yeah.
So if anybody has questions, I might repeat them, or if you have a good voice that projects, feel free to
We
project.
will come and bring you the microphone. So
Oh,
we have
okay.
the
Oh, perfect.
audience on Zoom. So if you have a question, raise your hand high and we'll bring you the microphone. I saw him first.
I don't need a mic.
We need the microphone. We need the microphone for the Zoom audience.
Okay.
Yes.
Gonna have to talk softly, I guess.
No, you can project.
Shortening. Talked about what you use for shortening in France that isn't Crisco.
Oh, well, so for home baking, I literally do just use Crisco because it doesn't really exist. You can get it at, are you based in Paris? Yeah, so there's an American little épicerie grocery store called In Good We Trust.
But why don't you go to the French supermarket?
Because they don't stock it. You have to go to the American places.
They don't have shortening?
Not that I've come across. No, not that's as nice as they'll have margarines and things like that. But
I've researched it a bit.
Yeah. A tube or like the rectangle thing. Yeah. Fat. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't tried. I think some of the issues with that is you are going to be working with like different water content. So like for me, it's like Crisco works. Also, the book was published in the US and it's an ingredient though that is available here if you look around for a little bit. I would say my only hesitation with that would be the same as well if you're using like any butter or margarine is there might always be like a little bit of discrepancies with water content. So you might have to adjust a little bit based on that. But I'd be interested to hear if you try it.
The good thing about Crisco is it lasts like 30 or 40
Yeah,
years.
exactly.
You can order like a case and it'll still be the same when you open it. So.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks.
What is the address of your bakery?
Oh, so I'm at 80.
It's not in your cookbook. I looked.
Oh, it should be at the front because I do a list, but it's at it's 86 Rue d'Aboukir in the second. Yeah, you're welcome.
Other questions in the room?
Hi. So you mentioned you eat at a lot of Asian places. And
Yeah.
And obviously, there's a long history of umami in Asian food.
Yeah.
And I'll put a disclaimer. I work for a company that makes umami seasonings.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what is
Did you
your
bring
view?
any?
Yeah, I'm like, did you bring any?
Yeah, I was wondering, what is your view on and we talk about Crisco as well. MSG is the obvious one, the savory counterpart to some sweet. I was wondering, what are your views on like using umami in vegan cuisine and even in vegan baking?
It's delicious. I think I fully, I think anything that enhances flavor. I think umami is a really, envy or desirable kind of element in any kind of cooking. I haven't experimented with it that much in baking. I would be interested in doing so, as David and I were saying.
Mushrooms.
But yeah.
Like dried mushrooms, and people use mushrooms for like dessert.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we were saying earlier as well, we always you kind of want to play around and experiment.
Yeah.
So I think that would be something that I'd be really interested in. In savory food, I am all about it.
I actually have fish salt from Red Boat in my kitchen next to my stove. I use that. It's not vegan, but it's great. You get to go sparingly.
Love your donuts.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you should do cooking classes. Like, would you ever consider doing something like that at your bakery, inviting people in to learn how to cook really wonderful desserts vegan style?
Yes, I'm actually thinking about starting to do that. I've thought about maybe starting them online first because although the kitchen is big at Bone Shaker, I'm not sure it's equipped really to do like classes there. So I was thinking about maybe more doing some kind of like an online course. But yeah, watch this space.
I have a question on if you have any comments on the shift towards veganism and its impact with climate change.
In what way? What do you mean?
Just as that's kind of like the cultural shift that we see with people going towards veganism and away from animal products and its hopeful impact on climate change. Is that something that you have like personally considered or something that you think that you would encourage people to go towards as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that it's been widely documented that eating a more plant-based diet or going fully plant-based is the most single effective thing that a human can do to reduce their footprint on the planet. It's the most attainable thing that any individual can do to help climate change. So certainly that's something that I would wholeheartedly endorse, and is also part of the reason that I eat the way that I do. As I said, I initially went plant-based as kind of a stepping stone, or went vegan from being vegetarian due to animal rights, but obviously climate change. And I'm having trouble seeing you. But obviously climate change and the effect on the environment is huge. And if anything, it's just like a massive bonus. I think there are a number of reasons to eat a plant-based diet, and that is obviously a huge one.
So can I be the devil's advocate here? I have
Sure,
a
go
question.
for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was in the U.S. a couple of years ago, and I bought some Impossible meat because
Yes.
we didn't have it here then. then,
Yeah.
and I wanted to try it.
Yeah.
And I made something out of it, and I put a recipe online. And a lot of people chimed in, like, I would never eat that overly processed stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, do you really know what's in ground meat that you buy?
Right.
But I was wondering if you could sort of talk about that, because I didn't have enough. I have a feeling there's a certain amount of people that are just vocally against it, just to be against it.
Yeah.
And I looked at the ingredients and it didn't look like there was anything that weird in it.
No, so I'm not an expert on the vegan meats, but my understanding is, as you said, they are processed. But I think so is a McDonald's chicken nugget, which you don't see that many people leaving the same type of comments for, or a hot dog, like you mentioned earlier. So, and I think also culturally, a lot of people seem to confuse veganism with being this like puritanical healthy diet, which is it's not. It just means you don't eat.
You can have Crisco.
You can have Crisco. Do you know what I mean? So, but I discovered that a little bit as well, kind of when I was in the States, and for the book and going visiting some places, and I'd get some people coming in who were like, well, I don't eat any like fat, sugar, gluten, like I'm vegan and I don't eat any of this. So I think that and that's not, I mean, good for them, but that's not my style of veganism. So for me, I'm like, have your Impossible Burger. Again, if you're worried about eating processed foods, then again, the other option is then just don't eat that. But for somebody who wants to recreate, I don't think Impossible Burger is claiming to be any healthier than any of like a hot dog, for instance. But it's like a treat that you can have at a barbecue if you want to experience, if you're like, I really want a burger. Here's an alternative, you know what I mean? Like, here's an alternative one for you. It's kind of is my view on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to try it. It was fine. I made kefta.
They're good, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kenji, who writes for the New York Times, he uses Impossible meat for ragu.
Yeah.
He says it's better than meat, beef, or veal because it doesn't get hard when you cook it for a long time. It actually softens and gets silky.
Yeah.
And we don't really get it. I see it at Metro, but I never see it at this. I mean, I don't look
No,
for
it's hard to. It is hard to get. It is hard to get. It's one of those things that when I do go back to the States, I'm like all about the I'm like, give me those Impossible Burgers.
I know how to replace, for example, milk and cream. What's your go-to replacement for egg? It's a bit of a loaded question, I know, but depending on what you're making.
So it's exactly. My answer to that would be exactly that. It depends on what you're making, depending on what you needed the egg to do in that initial recipe. Whether you want it to bind, whether you want it to rise, whether it needs to be a little bit of a combination of both. In which case, I might add, baking powder and you might an extra boost of a leavening agent as well as something to bind. My go-to that I tend to use a lot is aquafaba. Which that I just find works the best for me in a lot of options. But again, I also rely heavily on like chia eggs. I'm a big fan of like the chia seed or flax seed egg. Those are my. Yeah, so exactly, mush it because it becomes kind of gelatinous or very gelatinous, and is a really good. You're going to get like a really good bind for that. Yeah.
We have some wonderful questions on Zoom about your creative process in coming up with recipes and adapting. Can you talk more about that, please?
Sure. In what way?
They're talking about your trial and error process. How many trials do you go through before finalizing a recipe, and what do you look for in changing tastes?
Oh, okay. So it totally. Hi.
Hello,
Sorry.
Zoom.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello to our Zoom audience.
It totally depends. Sometimes I'll get something right, on the first try. Not often, but sometimes that does happen. I mean, again, it really depends on the recipe, though. Like, I think, and I'm sure it's the same for you, like some recipes, you come together relatively quickly. Some recipes, you have the idea, and sometimes it just doesn't work at all, where you're like, this is going to be amazing, or this happens to me at least. Sometimes I have this like great idea for like a dessert or a finished product, and you end up putting everything together, and you're like, actually, this looks really ugly, or this tastes not good. These things didn't go together the way I thought they would. But on the whole, I'd say it is exactly that, though. It's trial and error.
Have you ever cried testing a recipe? Like when you can't get it right.
I'm sure I probably have. Yes.
I have.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we've all that like crushing disappointment when you're like, it's not working.
Well, I was at a culinary conference once, and it was like all these cooking people. And I was with Flo Breaker, who wrote books about cake baking. She was a very meticulous cake baker, lovely woman. And somebody came up to this young woman and said, I'm writing my first cookbook, so excited. But she's like, some of the recipes I've had to test 3 times. Oh, yeah. And I was like, so then she walked away, and Flo looked at me and she goes, oh my God, if you get it right the third time,
I know, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you have to get rid of everything. Yeah. It's like, all right, who's going to take all this rice pudding?
Yeah,
you know?
this failed rice pudding.
Yeah, you can't give away failed food because people think like, well, David's rice pudding sucks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I thought you were a pastry chef.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. So I hope I answered that.
Thank you. I have a question about how you started out in terms of building up your client base. Were you aiming, first of all, towards American expats, or was your plan to kind of get French people, Parisians, to get more into American desserts?
I think I definitely wanted local people to be interested in the desserts. I think for me, I wasn't sure at the beginning if it was going to be only sort of like Anglophones who were looking for a taste of home. But I was really hopeful and wanted Parisians to be on board, seeing as we're located here. And
right.
And so I think that we were actually we were embraced pretty early on. I think the biggest hurdle for us at the very beginning was explaining to people that everything was handmade, because we were the first donut shop to open. And so prior to that, everybody had really the idea that donuts were really, really industrial. And so they had
expectations.
Yeah, exactly. They were kind of like, oh, it's like everybody was like Homer Simpson. You know what I mean? Like they were like Homer Simpson, industrial food. And so I think the biggest thing for us was just showing people that actually we make everything from hand, from scratch in the shop. And once we were able to kind of prove that that was what was happening, people were interested in trying.
What was your process of translating what you learned in culinary school into first vegetarian cooking and baking, and then now vegan? I mean, I'm just an amateur baker, so I don't know how much those techniques translate. But what was that journey for you?
Well, being a pastry chef, the vegetarianism didn't matter that much in my professional life, aside from maybe if I was using like gelatin in a panna cotta or something like that. But it was interesting. So I'd say it's a tricky question to answer succinctly. I would say that it's more like theories that might transfer over. So understanding a little bit how he was asking about the eggs, understanding that like, okay, if an egg in this recipe is doing this, then what alternative can I find that will closely replicate that? And you give that a go. And then you say, okay, well this, I got the bind on this one, but I also need a bit of a rice. So like, what can I do? And so there's and there are some things that are going to transfer over regardless what you're doing. And others, I think it's a lot of, picking out specifically what the traditional ingredient was doing and then finding a plant alternative. Using sort of the same kind of like theory though, and putting that in. But that's why as well it was kind of really fun, because it was really uncharted territory for me. So I was able to kind of play around a bit, and it was kind of really exciting to be doing all that. Yeah.
Quickie, my sister in the States is vegetarian, and she goes to Whole Foods and she gets veganese.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything similar here? Because I went to a bio store and there was some kind of false mayonnaise that was disgusting.
Right.
So do you know if they have veganese over here at all?
There is and again, I don't know that they always have it in stock, but there are a few vegan like little grocery stores, and they sell. So there's Aujourd'hui Demain in the 11th, and there is Mon Épicerie Vegan, I think it's called, in the 4th, maybe 3rd. It's not super far from Bone Shaker. And they are going to have all of the like vegan mayonnaises and butters and everything that, now they aren't cheap, but they are good. And like, so, but they do exist here. You just have to go to the specialty shops.
Well, aioli originally didn't have eggs in it.
Oh.
It had bread.
Cool.
Because people in the South didn't want to have eggs, and it was to leave it out all
Right,
the time.
yeah.
So it was originally bread.
Oh, yum.
So maybe try a
Yeah,
bread-based.
yeah, that'd be cool.
I mean, it's a binder.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get that recipe from you later.
Okay,
For
I
real.
don't have a recipe.
Yeah.
Very quick. Bone Shaker's such a wonderful name. Is there a backstory to that?
Yeah, so, but not in any way related to donuts. So it's an old bicycle that was invented here in Paris. Here they call it the velocipede. And when they shipped it over to the Americans in the late 1800s, it was one of the first prototypes of bicycle. They shipped it over to the States, and the Americans started calling them bone shakers because when you'd ride on the cobblestones, they were all wooden frames. So you'd be like, so, and I was trying to think of a name for the bakery, and I'm a history nerd, and I think I was just reading some article somewhere and saw Bone Shaker. I liked the aesthetic of the bike, thought it was a cool name, and I was like, this is going to be the name of the bakery.
Good question.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
We have time for one more question in the room.
How do you explain the French, or maybe just Parisian, craze for donuts with all these donut shops coming up everywhere?
Yeah, I don't know. As I said, I mean, it's cool. It's funny because when I opened, you know, we couldn't get a loan from the bank because no donut shops existed, and I was told point blank that I was going to fail because French people would never eat donuts. So it's changed a lot.
Take a picture on
Yeah.
Saturday and send it to them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Saturday after the line down the border.
Yeah. But it's true. So perhaps, yeah, I think that it's, you know, I think it is. I mean, yeah, with I mean, like there was all this hullabaloo when Krispy Kreme opened and stuff. So I don't know. I guess it's trendy at the moment, but I wouldn't be able to explain the sudden fascination aside from. I guess it's just something that's.
I think a lot of it is young people.
Yeah.
There was a radical shift in the way, like, there's not going to, like, this generation of, like, 20-somethings, they're not going to be the madame at the market, you know, when they're older, driving the trolley, you know, with the trolley ordering a fig,
Right.
you know, and spending 10 minutes discussing it. You know, they're much more global. They, you know, consume the internet. They have media. They're like, they don't have preconceived notions about veganism
Right.
or, you know, American food's really bad or whatever. You know, they do think Crisco's shit, but I just think, you know, when you go to restaurants now, like, young people, like, they're nice, except for the restaurant you were talking about. But, you know, you go out to eat and they're, like, friendly and they're like, oh, oui, monsieur, c'est bon, ça. They'll tell you, they're not like, oh, je sais pas.
Right.
You know, they're very nice
Yeah.
and friendly.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll see how long that remains.
Right.
But it seems to me like all these American places are opening, like the cookie shops, you know, for better or worse. And this, you know, the cookie, what's it called?
I
The
haven't
crookie.
tried one. I wonder if there's a vegan
I tried
version of
one.
that.
Yeah. My bakery gave me one.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
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 Can we have a final round of applause, please?
For the cookie.